All right, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating and honestly a surprisingly accessible corner of the Bitcoin world, running your very own full node.
Yeah, you heard that right. When you think about running a piece of a global financial network, you're probably picturing, massive server farms. But what if I told you thousands of people are doing this on a tiny computer that costs just 35 bucks? Seriously, we're talking about a device that's about the size of a deck of cards.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at this whole $35 Bitcoin machine idea. Then, we'll get into the real reasons why you'd even want to run a node. We'll take a peek inside what we're calling the blockchain's diary, figure out the price of participation, and then, at the end, tackle the big one. Should you run one?
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the $35 Bitcoin machine. We're going to unpack just why running your own node has gotten so popular.
This really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty clear this takes some effort. So why in the world would anyone go to all this trouble? What's the real payoff here?
Well, let's answer that question right now. Section 2, why run a node? This is all about the motivation, the drive to take direct control of your own financial world.
It really boils down to four big reasons. First off, security. You don't have to trust anyone else to tell you your transaction went through. You're basically becoming your own bank. Second, privacy. You're not shouting your financial life to some third-party company. For developers, a third reason is it gives you a direct line to build things on top of Bitcoin. And finally, you're actually making the entire network stronger. Every single node that comes online makes Bitcoin more robust, more decentralized.
Okay, so we've got the why, but what is a node actually doing? What's happening under the hood? Let's get into the mechanics in our next section, the blockchain's diary. Here's the big idea. A Bitcoin full node is essentially a complete historical record, like a diary, of pretty much every single transaction ever confirmed on the network, going all the way back to the very beginning in 2009. Now, we are not talking about a little text file here. This diary is massive. It's a data set that's hundreds of gigabytes, and it just keeps on growing. Just think about that for a second. The entire economic history of this whole network sitting right there on your own machine. So how do you get all that data? Well, it doesn't just download in one big chunk. Your node has to sync up block by block over the internet. And depending on your computer and your connection, this initial setup, well, it can take several hours or maybe even a few days.
And that whole process leads us right into the practical side of things. Section 4, the price of participation. Let's look at what you're actually going to need to get this thing up and running.
It really comes down to three key things. First, like we just saw, you need a good amount of disk space for those hundreds of gigs. Second, a fast internet connection is pretty crucial, not just for that initial download, but for keeping up. And third, and this one's important, you're going to need some time and a whole lot of patience, especially for that first sync.
And here's something you absolutely have to understand. Your node isn't really doing its job until that download is 100% complete. It can't validate new transactions or check on anything without the entire history of the blockchain to reference. It needs that full context to work properly.
Okay, we've covered the why, the what, and the how. And that brings us to our final section, and really the whole point of this. Should you run one? Let's try and make that final decision.
So who is this really for? The source material actually puts it perfectly. It says, if you're interested in strong security, superior privacy, or developing Bitcoin software, you should be running your own node. That kind of says it all, right? It's probably not for the super casual user, but it's definitely for anyone who wants that next level of control and wants to really engage with the network. So it all comes down to this. We've seen that the hardware can be ridiculously cheap, but the cost in your time, your data storage, and your patience, that's very real. So that leaves us with the final question for you to think about. Is that full, sovereign control over your own money, is it actually worth the effort?